Thank you for tuning in to Voices for Freedom, an anti-human trafficking podcast. We want to acknowledge that the content we discuss can be emotionally challenging and may evoke strong reactions. The stories we share often delve into tough subjects related to human trafficking, which may be difficult for some listeners to hear. Our goal is to raise awareness and promote understanding of the complexities surrounding human trafficking. Listener discretion is advised. Coming up on Voices for Freedom, an anti-trafficking podcast.
But his wife started having a panic attack. And while we're searching the house, Rosco was hanging out in the living room. And just his presence, he went and leaned up against her leg and started putting his head on her thigh. And she went from having this panic attack where we were contemplating calling EMS to actually calming down, and she stopped crying.
Welcome to Voices for Freedom, an anti-trafficking podcast brought to you by o.u.r Rescue. I'm Matt Osborne, Global Ambassador for Operations and Education. We have so enjoyed this series thus far as we've focused on the work of o.u.r Rescue overseas, aftercare, and today we're going to focus on one of the jewels in our crown, and that's our domestic law enforcement support. In many ways, we're more active domestically than we are overseas, even though we got our start some 10 years ago internationally. And when you talk about the jewels, the absolute jewel that everyone wants to know about is our K9 program. I'm sure many in the audience have heard of a bomb-sniffing dog and a drug-sniffing dog. Well, today we're going to learn about an electronic storage device dog. Dogs that can sniff out digital media devices. It's absolutely incredible. And we have as our guest, and we're so grateful to have him in studio, Lieutenant John Hanning. John Hanning works for Rogers County Sheriff's Office in Oklahoma, just outside of Tulsa, and he is the handler of K9 Rosco. Although, as you may say some point, that Rosco may handle you. I don't know. These dogs are wonderful. But John, thank you so much for your support of o.u.r Rescue. Thanks for letting us support you. And we'll talk today in a few different segments in this show, but I think the first to start for our viewers and in the audience is a little bit about your start in law enforcement. Did you always know you wanted to be a police officer, a peace officer? Did you even know about child exploitation cases? What kind of brought you to sort of what you're doing today?
Well, attended college in East Central University in Oklahoma, and my family has a long history of being proactive in the community. My father was a colonel in the U.S. military, and my uncle, a detective at the Tulsa Police Department. So always wanted to serve my community, and this was a great opportunity to serve my community by getting into law enforcement.
So did you start right after college, and what were some of the initial cases you were working on? My brother-in-law is a police officer, and he's doing a lot of, black and white car patrol duty, drugs and thugs he talks about. What were some of your first cases?
Worked for the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office in the jail, and then worked my way to various other law enforcement agencies doing general patrol work, taking calls for service and traffic stops and drugs and just various crimes.
So I oftentimes have told my story, and I was 12 years with the CIA and U.S. Department of State, and when I first heard about this issue of human trafficking, back in 2006. I admit, I'm ashamed to say it now, I thought this was prostitution. I thought this was the movie Pretty Woman. You remember that back in the day, right? The Julia Roberts character that, this lie about that character. Oh, she decides when to work and who she has to be with and how much she charges and she keeps all the money. No, these are victims, right? This is exploitation. When was it that you first heard about these type of cases, and when did you start working cases of human trafficking, forced prostitution, and child exploitation?
Several years ago, I attended a conference in Tulsa and ran into a group that was had a task force, Internet Crimes Against Children task force. So I got interested in that, got us to where we're at today. We're with Homeland Security Investigations on their task force, which stands for the Tornado Alley Child Exploitation and Human Trafficking.
That's a mouthful, but yes. I can imagine. That's a multi-state, correct?
That's
Not just
correct.
Oklahoma?
Yes.
Trying to
Texas,
think.
Oklahoma, and Kansas.
Okay. Which, obviously Tornado Alley, which, we don't want to make too light of it. I live in North Texas in Tornado Alley. You are as well. But the fact that you're bringing these various law enforcement units together to fight this crime, I think, is incredible. And how long have you been on the task force?
They just recently formed the task force, so several months.
That is amazing.
But we've been on ICAC task force for a couple of years.
So I would imagine people in the audience might think, well, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rogers County, central United States, come on, that's not New York, that's not LA, that's not Miami. There's not a lot of human trafficking going on there. You wouldn't think there's a lot of tourism, a lot of nightlife. What would you tell our audience about the trafficking trends you are seeing in Rogers County and that part of Oklahoma?
We have a lot of, I worked a case a couple of years ago. We had a juvenile runaway that became involved in the sex trade, and she traveled from, once she ran away from the Rogers County area, went to Houston, to Dallas, came back to Tulsa, and we were able to rescue her in the Tulsa area. We do have a lot of crimes because the crime in Tulsa, the Tulsa area, is one of the huge hubs for drugs and coming from the East Coast to the West Coast, as well as human trafficking.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have highways, anytime you have roads, anytime you have rural areas as well, these traffickers will try to move what they call their merchandise through there, correct? And
That's
in
correct.
This area, a lot of followers of Our Rescue who've been with us from the beginning may know of our rescue operations in support of law enforcement in Colombia and Thailand and Mexico, and they probably aren't quite aware of our domestic program. We oftentimes say that overseas, and again, this is a generalization, that trafficking tends to be poverty-fueled or poverty-driven. In the United States, we see a lot more drug-fueled, drug-driven vulnerabilities in children, latchkey kids, broken homes, but not only. I know a woman who was trafficked in Dallas, Texas, two-parent household, very wealthy. How would you describe a typical victim? How would you describe a survivor that you're seeing in your area?
They're all vulnerable juveniles, either have come from broken homes.
And this happens everywhere. And that's the thing. It can happen everywhere. It can happen online. And these traffickers, these predators, these child predators, are storing a lot of their material. As you know, we used to call it child pornography. We don't say that anymore. We say CSAM, child sex abuse material, or CSAM, child sexual exploitation material, on cell phones, laptops, hard drives, but also thumb drives, SD cards. And that's where our K9 program comes in. So I'd be interested to know a little bit about how you first heard of Our Rescue and in this K9 program, and how Rosco came to, as we'll talk about later in the show, truly a member of your family. But just right now on the professional level, you with Rogers County Sheriff's Office, how did you hear about Our Rescue and the K9?
Well, I attended a lot of the conferences for the Internet Crimes Against Children, ran into your organization in the Atlanta conference several years ago. Yeah. Found out about these service dogs, these ESD dogs, and thought that was a wonderful program. We've worked several cases when we didn't have them, and you always in the back of your mind would always have that, well, did I get everything? Did I find all those devices that I'm looking for? Because as we all know, it's that one device that we miss could be the device that helps us locate a child who's been abducted or is being abused.
You know, and you went through the training, right, certification at Jordan Canine Detection in Indiana, correct?
That's correct.
And what Todd Jordan has said in the past, and you can probably back this up, but I would be interested in your thoughts. You sort of hinted at it just now. In a drug case, if a drug-sniffing dog misses a quantity of drugs, it's natural, it happens. Okay, you miss some drugs. But as you just said, and I hope our audience really focuses on this, if a human eye or even the dog misses an SD card, a USB, that could be children who need rescued, right? And that's
Absolutely.
Why these dogs are so important.
Absolutely. We take him on all of our cases that we work. If it has anything to do with kids, sexual abuse, just anything, because it's, like I said, every time that we've taken him, the investigators will do an initial search of the property, and then we'll go in afterwards, and every single time we've always found a device that was overlooked.
It is incredible, and we'll talk a little bit more in later segments, but for the audience now to hear a little bit about how Our Rescue heard about these dogs, it was a few years ago, and many in the audience may remember Jared, the Subway sandwich pitchman, right? Jared was quite corpulent, and he said he lost a bunch of weight eating Subway sandwiches. Well, Jared was a bit of a predator that we can call. He's been convicted. He's had his day in court. And he was telling a coworker some pretty disgusting things about his proclivities. Coworker was horrified, talked to police. Police asked her to wear a wire, got the information that was enough for a warrant. My understanding is the state police went in on one or two occasions and couldn't find his stash of digital media. They brought in a dog. It was not one of our dogs at the time. I think his name was Bear. And within minutes, Bear found terabytes of data that Jared had. And I'm curious if you were familiar with that story or know that that's then how we found out about these dogs and said, all right, we've got to support, we've got to empower law enforcement and get as many of these types of canines into the hands of you who are on the front lines in this fight.
Well, that was the story I heard that got us interested in looking into the program in your organization. And it's a great story because we worked numerous cases, and it's always been, like, did I find it all? Was any device that could have led to saving a child was always there. So now we have Rosco, and it really helps us get that peace of mind.
Well, we're grateful, and I mean, look what a well-behaved dog here. This is amazing. We're going to wrap up this segment. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Lieutenant Hanning's personal experiences with Rosco, not only on cases, but what a blessing he's been to the family, to the neighborhood, to the office. But right now, don't go anywhere. You are watching Voices for Freedom, an anti-trafficking podcast brought to you by o.u.r Rescue. A big thanks to our sponsor, o.u.r Rescue Store, for supporting our podcast. The o.u.r Rescue Store is committed to responsibly sourcing products that ignite conversations about human trafficking, raising awareness, and contributing to the movement against it. With more than enough colors, designs, and items to choose from, there's definitely something for you. Find something you'll be proud to own and be an advocate for change. Visit store.ourrescue.org and use the promo code VOICES10 for 10% off your purchase. That's VOICES10 on store.ourrescue.org. And welcome back to Voices for Freedom, an anti-trafficking podcast. We are talking to Lieutenant John Hanning in Rogers County Sheriff's Office in Oklahoma, who is the handler for ESD Canine Rosco, electronic storage device Canine Rosco. And John, in the first segment, we talked about your background, what brought you to law enforcement, to child exploitation cases that do exist in the central United States. A lot of people don't know that in rural areas. Talk a little bit now about this hero number 2. We call you hero number 1. This is hero number 2. A little bit about what Rosco has done for your family and for your neighborhood, above and beyond what we will then talk about, the cases that he's helping on, but just what has he meant to your family and your neighborhood? You shared an email a couple weeks ago, and if you're willing to share the contents, it absolutely warmed everyone's hearts and just improved the morale of our office across the board.
When I brought him home that day, my daughter just fell in love with him. And she's been side by side with him. We take him everywhere we go. All the neighborhood kids come over. She tells a story about what he does for a living and his background.
Now, does she know specifics? Because I remember my daughters are now college age. When they were younger, I kind of shared a little bit or kind of hit a little bit of it. Does she know exactly the type of predator Roscoe's targeting?
No, she just knows that he helps kids.
That's wonderful, and that's what he does.
Makes it safe for the kids and to make sure that nothing bad happens to them. So he shares those stories with all the other neighborhood kids. And we live in a small neighborhood, about 700 homes. So we have about 20 kids that roam around our house and about the same age as my daughter, who's 12. And they'll come over and they'll ring the door and, hey, is Elizabeth home? Can Rosco come with us? So they are always taking them to the field and playing, various games, throwing the ball and catching the ball and dressing them up and all kinds of fun stuff.
Now, answer honestly, do you ever get offended when people come over and ask for Rosco first and not you, your wife, your kids?
No, I'm used to it. Even at work, I take them to the district attorney's office and they're like, hey, we're glad you're here, but we really want to see Rosco. Or if I show up there, the judges will always ask, like, where's Rosco? So they much rather see Rosco than the stuff that I bring them.
What you just said reminds me of something. Our VP of Domestic Law Enforcement Support, Tracy Wyant, who does an incredible job with our team, he and I were in Texas a few weeks ago, and we went to the Dallas ICAC, Dallas Police Department, where Canine Remy was there. And the handler would take us around the office, kind of like you just said, and talk about the morale improvement around the office with this dog. Think about the men and women, and I'd like to hear about in your office. You can just imagine these men and women are on the front lines every day looking for child predators, looking for just these, having to watch these videos, these heavy, heavy topics. And yet this dog comes in, this sweet dog. Talk a little bit about the morale, what Rosco has done in the Rogers County, Oklahoma Sheriff's Office.
All of our offices, we have all the investigators. We're in our own little office space. So he just walks from office to office. If he hears tension in someone's voice, he'll come over and lay his head on their lap, or on sometimes if an investigator has a rough phone call with an individual, Rosco can hear it and just sense that tension. He'll actually climb on their lap, at work. They just love him. And he's always walking around.
Well, he's anywhere as cute as he is right now. And yes. I mean, what he's doing here, this is great. And we did not sedate him. We did not do anything like that. This is just him being good for his handler. Lieutenant Hanning, for someone in our audience, again, as we mentioned earlier, they'd be like, well, I understand a bomb sniffing dog, what they'd be trying to sniff out. And I understand a drug sniffing dog, what they might be sniffing out. Cliff's Notes version for someone who failed chemistry, biology, all of that. What is it exactly that Rosco and these type of dogs are sniffing out in the digital media devices you're trying to target of suspected child predators?
Well, basically, it's one chemical that they spray on all circuit boards that store data, and it keeps it from overheating. And that's the one chemical Roscoe's trained to hit on.
Okay. And I've heard that's TPPO. Don't even try to have me tell what that is, but that is that chemical compound, correct?
That's correct.
In every cell phone, hard drive, laptop, what else? Even the micro storage?
SD cards.
Yeah. And think about that, right? A thumbnail size SD card, micro SD card. How easy would that be to hide in a home, a trailer, anywhere, where humans, as good as you are in police departments and sheriff's offices, would miss, but these dogs sniff it out.
Yes, and AirTags as well. You wouldn't think of an Apple AirTag, and we've worked cases where people were tracking vehicles. And
how does Rosco know when to go to work? How does he transform from this delightful dog to knowing he needs to sniff out digital media devices and sniff that TPPO compound?
Well, Rosco's food-driven, so he doesn't get fed unless he works. So he's very motivated to find the devices and the work. So there's certain commands, that'll get him ready, if we're going to work, and he would become alert and he perks up and he becomes from a sleepy dog to, all right, I'm ready to work. And as we're going through the area, I introduce him to the area, say, this is the area that we're going to kind of search. And then we go back through and we just start search an area with his specific commands. And he's looking for the areas that I'm indicating, not cell phones that I have on my pocket, or if there's someone else in the room, he's not going to be hitting on those as well.
So food motivated, I imagine maybe eats a couple times a day or sporadically. However, I know the question in the audience, we're all dog lovers, right? No, we're not being cruel. They eat every single day, even when Lieutenant Hanning is off duty. What do you do on your off days? How do you ensure he's still getting the nourishment that a dog needs and still keeping his senses sharp?
We're constantly training. So we train 2 to 3 times a day. He's constantly eating. He works, it's his daily routine. So when we go actually do a search warrant or actually work in a case, that's just part of his daily routine. It's nothing normal, abnormal for him.
So a funny story I heard once from a handler, we'll see if you had a similar experience. 2 p.m. on a Sunday, she's not working, she's home watching something on TV. Well, all of a sudden, her canine starts going around the house and pulling all the dummy devices that have been used for training, cell phones, USBs, things that handlers like to use, put them at the handler's feet, and the handler says, okay, girl, you must be hungry. Time to train and time to eat. Does that happen as well? Does Rosco let you know when he's hungry?
Yes. He'll either climb on my lap or he'll start staring at me, just abnormal behavior that because normally he lays around or he walks around. He just does what Rosco does. But when he's hungry and he's, and if I forget, that's time to feed him, that he'll definitely remind me.
Well, I think in the next segment, we'll talk about some of your most interesting, noteworthy cases that Rosco has helped you on. But would you mind sharing the one really touching story in the email from a couple weeks ago about how these dogs, yes, they're trained to work, they sniff out these devices, they help law enforcement to gain evidence and gather evidence on predators, but they're also service dogs, they're also comfort dogs. They help in exponential ways. Do you mind sharing that story of that poor woman who was fortunately calmed by Rosco and his demeanor?
Yeah, a few weeks ago we were executing a search warrant on an individual who was hiding cameras in the bathroom in various places through a lake house, and his wife
To film his kids and friends,
to
or
film,
to film
people using the restroom.
Oh my
and
gosh!
So we were able to identify 3 victims, but his wife started having a panic attack. And while we're searching the house, Rosco was hanging out in the living room, and just his presence, he went and leaned up against her leg and started putting his head on her thigh, and she went from having this panic attack where they were contemplating calling EMS to actually calming down, and she stopped crying, started focusing on Rosco, and then Rosco's able to get her back to normal without any issues.
Just being a cute dog, just being there.
Yeah, I mean, because he normally does, like he was trained to do prior to what he does now, would lean on her and paid a lot of attention to her, and it was amazing to see. And I didn't really pay much attention to it. And it was one of my investigators who later on sent me a text message and told me about what he did and how he averted this lady from making a trip to the hospital. It was just absolutely amazing.
And we hear stories too about child victims, survivors who are in victim interview rooms and who are very upset, understandably, about having to testify in the experience, and that these dogs can comfort them as well. Have you had any other similar circumstances where Roscoe's been able to help above and beyond these ESD dogs' normal roles in trying to sniff out this digital media?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time at the Forensic Center there in Claremore, and it definitely helps the kids. When they show up, they're a little upset or they're just crying and just need someone to, have Rosco just pay a little attention to them, and so we go to the Forensic Center, and he's available to the courts if we have a victim. He's going to get up and testify, because as you can tell, he's pretty relaxed, not high strung.
Yes, yeah, as we can see here for sure. I don't think it's visible through the cameras now, but I'm looking at his vest, and it says Sheriff Electronic Detection K9 and has Our Rescue's logo there. Then it says Rosco Free Hugs. Do people see that? Do people know they can come up? Because I was even in the airport today, and there was a German Shepherd, I think, mix, and he was definitely a police dog, and it said, "Canine dog, do not touch, do not pet." This seems to be a little bit of the opposite, correct?
Oh, absolutely, because we drag him everywhere we go, because we not only talk about his history, but what he does, and it just kind of gets the awareness out to the public. And the first thing people is, "Can I pet your dog? I know he's a working dog." No, and I explain to him free hugs. So we put that on there, and he just loves people, just loves going out and meeting people, and gives us an opportunity to tell the story.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited here, and it looks like it's nap time perhaps as well. So I think if Roscoe's taking a snooze, it's a good opportunity for us to take a break as well. Don't go anywhere. We're going to come back with our final segment with Lieutenant Hanning. We're going to talk about some of the specific cases that he and Roscoe have worked in Rogers County, and then we'll get into a little bit more about how you can support and how the need for these dogs right now is greater than ever. This is Voices for Freedom, an anti-trafficking podcast brought to you by o.u.r. Rescue. I want to thank today's sponsor, the o.u.r. Rescue Store, for supporting this podcast. Did you know the o.u.r. Rescue Store features survivor-made items? In this critical fight, they serve as symbols of hope. By choosing to purchase one of these beautifully handcrafted items, you will impact the healing journey of survivors and help them reclaim their lives in the process. We encourage you to shop survivor-made items on the o.u.r. Rescue website. It might only be a few dollars to you, but it makes a world of difference to them. And in case you need any extra motivation, use promo code VOICES10 for 10% off your purchase at store.ourrescue.org. That's VOICES10 at store.ourrescue.org. And welcome back to Voices for Freedom, an anti-trafficking podcast brought to you by o.u.r. Rescue. I'm Matt Osborne, Global Ambassador for Operations and Education, and I've had the privilege to speak to Lieutenant John Hanning, Rogers County, Oklahoma Sheriff's Office, and a member of, and I had to write this down, the Tornado Alley Child Exploitation and Human Trafficking Task Force, TACIT. John, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for all that you do. You both are heroes. As you and I were talking during the break, you had a case even before you had Rosco, even knew of Rosco, that lets you realize how important dogs of this type would be and are. And do you mind sharing a little bit about that, even your pre-Rosco days?
Yes. So it was one of my first cases, and it just happened to be a really big case. We got a cyber tip from the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, where this individual was sharing his Dropbox account with different individuals. We executed a search warrant of his property and seized like all the devices that we could find. It was a pretty substantial size house, 2 stories, had a swimming pool in the backyard, and we found over 1 million artifacts of child sexual assault material on his cell phone and some computers. And he was planning on purchasing the child on the dark web and bringing him to Oklahoma and sexually abusing the child and then disposing of the child once he was done with that. So he was pretty prolific. And he also had access to children because he worked at one of the local hospitals. We're interviewing him and talking to him about if he's ever been hands-on, which we know he was. We just couldn't prove it. He never admitted to it, but he was having those thoughts and then the text messages. So that was our first case. And then when I found out about these dogs, kind of got me thinking, well, what device did we miss? You know, was it we could have missed a device that would have found where he was hands-on, where we could have provided services for these victims and got him more time in prison.
Yeah, and again, obviously in this business, and you talk about hands-on, but just so our audience realizes what that means. It's not enough for him to just be looking at the child sex abuse material. He needed to be abusing children and being there. And I mean, you found 1 million artifacts, and yet there were more probably, or could have been more. And how many hours would you say you had searched his location?
We were there about half a day, if not almost a full day, because it was a very big house. One thing that was interesting about how bad this individual was, and we were talking about Little Rogers County in Oklahoma. He was communicating with people. One of the big individuals he was communicating with was calling himself the pedo king because of the amount of the CSAM material that he had. And as they were exchanging these Dropbox accounts, because he had multiple of them with just tremendous amount of videos and images, this individual, he called himself the pedo king, told this individual, hey, I pass my crown to you.
So sick.
And if we would have had Rosco, because ever since we've had him, every search warrant we go on, we always find something that someone's overlooked. Either a cell phone, a USB stuck somewhere.
And again, as good as your team is, you spend half a day there. We're humans, right? We miss things. And yet these dogs, for the most part, find things that have been missed.
Yeah, Chance Dakin was 25 years old, and he was living with his parents, his grandparents. So his stuff wasn't just laying out in the open where someone could just log on and see it. So that's kind of what we're looking for. We're looking for those individuals in these cell phone devices that are concealed. They're concealed not only from us, but other household members. And so we're talking about a big house. I mean, you can hide that stuff anywhere.
Something you mentioned too, it just shows I've been working this business now for 10 years and trying to help law enforcement target these individuals. And the pedo king, I mean, the fact that he would put that out there, call himself that. These traffickers and predators oftentimes operate with such impunity because they don't think law enforcement's looking for them. Or if they are, they're certainly not going to find my little SD card, my USB thumb drive with terabytes of data and multiple air tags and others. But yet these dogs can. Talk to us a little bit about the year or so you've been with Rosco, and we realize you're only going to be able to speak in the most general details because these are still active law enforcement cases. We want to make sure we don't mess up anything in a court of law. But about how many search warrants have you been on with Rosco? What's his find rate? And again, this is secondary, tertiary, sometimes searches. And then anything you can share in general about cases just to show the positive impact that Rosco and you are having in Rogers County and in that region of Oklahoma.
Well, Rosco was the first ESD canine in Oklahoma. So my agency has opened them up for any agency that needs help. We're averaging about 1 or 2 a week. We help other agencies. A few weeks ago, we were at a school where a teacher was concealing cameras and videotaping people in schools. So that was about an hour and a half away. So Rosco and I drove out there and searched the locker rooms and places where these cameras could be concealed.
Did he find things, if you're able to tell even just numbers, you don't have to tell us where or what? Was he able to locate anything in the school?
That particular school we didn't, but every other search warrant we do, because we have investigators or law enforcement will go in and we'll search a room, a house, facility, and every single time, because Rosco and I will go in afterwards, and every single time we always find one or two devices. Mm-hmm. And it's not a good thing for us to find it, but we're glad, and it's a relief that we're able to find those one or two devices that could lead to saving a child.
And maybe in a case you mentioned in this school, the fact he didn't find anything was good, right?
Yes.
You'd already searched everything. And if the suspect was putting cameras up, maybe it means he didn't have his digital storage devices there. But these canines, obviously, as we say, are sort of the jewel in the crown of our rescues, domestic support. But we don't just provide canines. I think that we've been able to provide your organization with some other equipment, correct, or software. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then even if it's not support that we provided to you, what would you say to our audience about the need of sheriff's offices, police departments such as yours, task forces? Again, you men and women on the front lines are doing the best you can, but with limited resources. We like to bridge that gap. So many people talk about defund the police, defund the police. We fund the police, and we're grateful for the opportunity to work with your sheriff's office. What would you say about some of the support we've provided beyond Rosco, and then the other support that is needed in domestic U.S. law enforcement that perhaps our donors could help us to provide?
You guys provided us Gray Key, which is forensic software that we use to get into these devices, to unlock them, to look for these child victims and evidence to these crimes these individuals are taking. And without your organization, it would be virtually impossible.
Because if you didn't have that, I assume, and I'm not an expert, but that's to go through someone's cell phone maybe, right? Laptop, hard drive. Without that Gray Key, what would you do? Would you have to send it somewhere else? Are we talking maybe months before you got that back as opposed to hours or days?
Yes, we'd have to send it off, and if it wasn't one of our partners who were not going to charge us, then we'd have to wait long periods of time for it to come back. But now we're able to do it in-house. We can do it quicker, and the turnaround is better, so we can get to those victims quicker.
And that's what we're trying to do with this technology. I hear from law enforcement contacts and colleagues that they work cases and say, hey, we need to go to a lab to get this phone looked at or this laptop, and they'll say, perfect, it might be 3 weeks, it might be 2 months because we've got homicides and we've got rapes and burglaries and everything behind. Get in line, right? But now you have this technology. As our audience thinks about the number of towns and cities in the United States and the amount of counties with sheriff's offices, towns and cities with police departments, what would you say are the greatest needs right now let's start first with maybe a rural, and again, I know that you're just right outside of Tulsa, but outside of the big cities, what are the greatest needs of law enforcement to combat child exploitation and human trafficking?
The forensic equipment, that stuff's really expensive, and for small rural communities, it's difficult to justify the expense on that.
Do you know more or less how much the device itself, the software, the programs cost than the licenses, just to give our audience an idea?
Well, Gray Key, if I remember correctly, was around $10,000, the initial, and that's just for a short period of time.
Correct. Not even licenses, right? And not even training.
Just reoccurring, and then the training to send someone out of state to get trained for that, not only Gray Key, but the other forensic equipment and other software. It's very expensive.
Mm-hmm. And then how about for these dogs, the cost of the dogs, to your knowledge of how much it would cost to place a dog to do the training and all of that?
So Rosco was about $25,000. That was the initial cost that your organization put up, and then our agency pays for the veterinarian care and the food and like everything else. And then every year we have to go back to Indiana for recertification and more training. And
yeah, and that's the numbers I have as well. And it's kind of gone up a little in recent years, as so much has in our economy, but just over $20,000, $22,000, approaching $25,000 for the training. Think about the specialized training that has to happen in Indianapolis at Jordan Canine Detection to get these dogs trained. And then what I love the story is the experts with the dogs will learn about their temperament. Then they meet the handlers and learn a little bit about their home life. And we do the site visits, and then the dogs are paired with the handlers. And then we provide that training, but we're grateful for then the law enforcement units themselves then to step up with the food and veterinary care. And these dogs, again, are not kept in crates here in the U.S. They are with the families, as you heard earlier. And I'm just grateful to get to know Rosco. I know we're going to do a demonstration for some of the workforce a little bit later tonight and some guests. But as we wrap up, Lieutenant Hanning, anything you would want to say to wrap up again on Rosco, on your job, and then maybe anything to our rescue donors who wonder sometime, well, does my $5 a month or my $25 a month, does 500 here, does 1,000 here really matter when we're talking about these type of dogs and equipment? What would you say to our supporters and donors?
It absolutely does matter. I mean, without the support of your organization, your donors, we wouldn't have had Rosco. In the cases that we've had very, tremendous success with, in those cases that we worked prior to having Rosco, as well as the forensic equipment that you guys were able to provide us, we wouldn't have it. Still be struggling, and no telling how many kids that we couldn't have saved. But it's been a very successful program. Very successful.
Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to. And when we go off camera here to wrap up a little bit, I don't know if I'll startle him. I hope not. If I just kind of pet him, we'll see here. He's been amazing. Again, just to reemphasize what Lieutenant Hanning said is that this is vital. The men and women on the front lines of law enforcement are doing the best they can and doing amazing work, but with limited resources and with the human capacities that are limited. The nose on these dogs, what they're doing now to find digital media, what they're doing now to ensure that these suspected predators are tried, are convicted, and if found guilty, are sentenced. This is just, it's amazing. So I am grateful. John, thank you so much, sir. Rosco, thank you. Big stretch there. We absolutely love you. And thanks to you for watching. Thanks for supporting Voices for Freedom, an anti-trafficking podcast brought to you by o.u.r. Rescue. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks for listening. Did you enjoy this episode? If so, please leave us a review and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have ideas for future episodes, email us at voicesforfreedom@ourrescue.org. Lastly, we encourage you to join the fight. Make a difference today by donating at ourrescue.org.
On the next episode of Voices for Freedom, an anti-trafficking podcast, join me as I interview Omar, our regional director for Mexico and the Caribbean, as he walks us through his efforts to build up his region on both the rescue operations, training, and aftercare front. You won't want to miss it.